Good afternoon. My name is Michael Bonini, and I am the Director of the PennDOT Office of Public-Private Transportation Partnerships. We are excited to be providing this industry outreach event today to relay additional project information and to outline the procurement approach and an estimated or anticipated procurement schedule. Joining me today is Jody Miziak with the Alternative Delivery Advisory Services team at WSP. We intend to cover several key topics today, including a review of the procurement approach, anticipated schedule, and additional information on key commercial terms outlined for the Major Bridges P3 initiative. We will not be holding an open question and answer session at the conclusion of this presentation, but we are encouraging questions be submitted through the chat function and through our project resource email account, which will be included as the last slide in our deck today. All responses will then be posted to the P3 website along with a recording of this presentation. So, as stated, this presentation is being recorded for additional viewing and will be uploaded to the P3 website. As a reminder, all previous information shared on the Major Bridges P3 initiative is also on the PennDOT P3 website. To set the framework for the project, I would like to start by outlining several key components of our planned P3 approach to this project. First and foremost, we want to accelerate the rehabilitation and replacement of up to 9 interstate bridges and associated roadways across the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Our goal is to leverage private investment upfront, since the needs of our bridge replacement projects are greater than our current existing funding streams. The progressive P3 will be delivered via a design, build, finance, maintain model, including the execution of a pre-development agreement. Our concession period is to be determined at this time, and we are currently running financial models and working to understand the confluence of these models with the life cycle of new interstate bridges. The project will be an availability payment deal funded by toll revenues and backstopped by the department if necessary. And finally, the toll collection component of the project will be coordinated with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission and their vendor, with toll setting authority maintained throughout the project by PennDOT. Also, as noted on the bottom of the slide, we've achieved several key milestones to date, including the release of a request for information document, which received 23 responses. So we thank the industry for your input and thoughtfulness with answers to our posted questions. Also, we held an initial industry outreach presentation in late March, followed up with 9 virtual one-on-one meetings with selected respondents to the RFI. Now we are providing this presentation with the plan to release the project RFQ soon, which will be articulated shortly. Shown here on this slide are the 9 interstate bridges included in the Major Bridges P3 initiative. Together, they are anticipated to represent a total project size in terms of construction of around $1.5 billion, with the Interstate 83 South Bridge, identified here as Candidate F in South Central PA on the map, being the largest construction project, with anticipated costs of around $650 million. All other bridge construction costs are anticipated to be between $40 million and $250 million. More information on the bridges can be found online and at the individual candidate bridge websites in the previous March 29th industry presentation on PennDOT's Major Bridges P3 Initiative Project website. Also, more defined information on the bridges and their costs are anticipated to be included in the upcoming RFQ. Over the past several months, we at PennDOT have continued to engage with various stakeholders to refine the P3 approach for the project. Based on this feedback and refinements to the potential approach, a refined procurement strategy has been outlined, as illustrated on this slide. The procurement would involve a single two-step procurement, including both a request for qualifications phase and a request for proposals phase, to select a single development entity to enter into a pre-development agreement with PennDOT. In this type of progressive P3, the initial procurement would not immediately result in a fixed price contract for the delivery of all 9 bridges, but rather a pre-development agreement with a development entity to coordinate closely with PennDOT to refine designs, cost estimates, risk allocation, and to finalize the financial structures. While this progressive P3 procurement approach is anticipated to require a shorter initial timeline than a more conventional P3 approach, the rigorous shortlist process will still be based on a strong combination of qualifications, financial capacity, and approach. And to assure the long-term success of the program, it will be critical to identify a development entity that will be a committed, collaborative partner for PennDOT. We will be focused on the selection of a development entity that proposes a strong, comprehensive, and feasible approach to packaging and delivering each of the 9 bridges through a series of multiple design, build, finance, and maintain P3 agreements. After the selection of a development entity, currently anticipated for the first quarter of 2022, a pre-development agreement will govern the collaborative work with PennDOT. The commercial close for a progressive P3 marks the beginning of a collaborative planning and refinement process with the development entity to finalize prices, scope, and future design build contracting opportunities for a variety of different bridge packages, partially based on the readiness characteristics of each bridge. As a result of that collaborative process, additional procurements for design build and other supplementary roles for the delivery of specific bridges could occur, presenting multiple opportunities for Pennsylvania contractors to pursue future design build teaming relationships. This approach could help facilitate refinements to risk mitigation strategies before the fixed prices of specific packages are finalized and before additional development entity team members are brought on board. So with the understanding of our procurement approach now for the project, illustrated here is our anticipated procurement schedule. We intend to issue the project request for qualifications next month with SOQs or statements of qualification due in July. From there, we will work to identify the shortlisted teams and issue the first draft of the RFP in the September timeframe. At this time, the final RFP is planned to be issued in December of this calendar year, with proposals due early in 2022. Commercial close for the planned pre-development agreement is sought shortly after the winning team is identified in the February 2022 timeframe, with then commercial close and financial close occurring on the first DBFM package by the end of 2022 as we work together in a collaborative manner with the selected proposer winning team. So now I'd like to turn the presentation over to Jody Miziak, who will cover additional commercial items of note as we move forward with the release or towards the release of the project RFQ.
Thanks, Mike. So on the next slide, we have agreement and payment mechanism, high-level items to highlight. Keeping in mind, while additional details regarding the agreement and payment structures will be provided as part of the procurement process, there are certain things that we want to make sure folks are aware of in advance. The tolls that are collected from bridges will support both the availability payments to the development entity and costs associated with toll collection. PennDOT will have a contractual arrangement with the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission to provide toll collection and processing services. PennDOT will have a separate contractual arrangement with the private sector, with the DE, for the specific P3 related work and the associated availability payment flows. So all of that, again, will be outlined in greater detail, but just to highlight how we're starting to envision the mechanisms to work. Then on the next slide, we will outline the anticipated development entity structure and requirements for SOQs. So moving onward, given the anticipated timeline for the procurement that Mike outlined so clearly a moment ago, we understand that it is important for potential proposers, and we've heard this from folks through the various outreach mechanisms, that they receive preliminary guidance with respect to the expectations for team structure. Based on the anticipated needs of the pre-development approach that Mike just outlined, along with the timing expectations outlined earlier, it is anticipated that the request for qualifications will require teams to propose structures that include the following key roles: equity members, lead construction contractor, and lead engineering firm. More details about these and additional requirements for interested proposers will definitely be provided in the request for qualifications that is anticipated for next month. It is also important to note that this guidance that we're presenting here simply represents the anticipated core required roles for the purposes of the request for qualifications process in the development of statements of qualification by each of the teams. And that is just the first step in the overall procurement and pre-development approach. A wide range of additional roles and expertise will definitely be necessary as the procurement progresses, and there will be a number of opportunities for various firms beyond the core required structure to become involved with the project. So very important to emphasize, this will certainly not be sufficient to deliver what we're looking for over the long term, but that it is will be considered to be the baseline requirement for the SOQ process, and at this time for the purposes of teams to start thinking about their potential teaming strategies. So keeping all of that in mind, you'll certainly see more details about it very soon, but we'll move on to the next slide where we'll provide a high-level view, similarly high-level view of the anticipated content for responses to the request for qualifications, which is also something that we've heard would be good to know as folks are starting to pull together their strategy for SOQs. So in the next slide, you'll see that in alignment with the implementation, the P3 implementation plan or implementation manual, there's a series of guidelines, and there will be requirements for the statements of qualifications to align with the expectations that have been established to date with the Pennsylvania P3 program. First, it will be critical for respondents to the RFQ to describe the structure and its structure as we've discussed on the previous slide, but potentially beyond that, and very much a focus on showing how those required roles will function in a development entity. It's also important background and experience in key areas, including financing, designing, constructing, and maintaining comparable projects will likely need to be provided. So keeping that all in mind as folks prepare for the SOQ process. Additionally, it will be important for respondents to the request for qualifications to demonstrate that they have sufficient financial capacity to assume the responsibilities for a project of this scope and scale. So as Mike outlined earlier, stepping through the multiple bridges and the sizing, that will certainly be a significant focus to ensure the successful delivery of the full program. Finally, PennDOT is likely to ask respondents to provide their understanding of the approach to development for the project. And of course, that will be based on information that will be made available, either as it's being made available now publicly or as part of the RFQ. So all of that information, keeping that in mind, is a very high level view, but certainly will give hopefully teams an indication of the things that PennDOT will be looking for as part of the RFQ process. Now, moving onward to the next slide, we'll provide a high-level overview of key P3 concepts. There will certainly be a wide range as we move through the process, but there's certainly some that we anticipate folks would be interested in hearing sooner rather than later. So the P3 concepts, it's important to note that the RFQ and RFP documents will certainly include more details about the bridges, which are the key components of this project, including any updates on timing and status of key milestones, such as those related to planning and environmental status. So there's some information that is already provided online, and if there are additional details that are relevant for the SOQ process and the further proposal process, those will be made available at the appropriate time. Additionally, we anticipate the procurement process will include opportunities for small, diverse, and disadvantaged firms to engage at various points in time, including potential opportunities for events, meet and greet events with shortlisted proposers as that occurs. So please keep an eye out for that. There will certainly be information provided on those types of events and outreach opportunities so that a broad range of entities can become involved in this program. It's also important to note, and you may have seen it, as part of the timeline slide previously, but just to emphasize, there is a very strong focus on facilitating an efficient process to reach financial close on at least the initial design, build, finance, maintain package in 2022, including, and that can be driven by things including incentives and potential penalties to encourage schedule discipline. This is extremely important to ensure that the critical infrastructure is in place as soon as it can be. It's also important to note that with respect to the agreements, the draft agreements are certainly still under development and consideration for specific terms. It is anticipated there will be limits for the maximum amount of work that could be self-performed or done by affiliates of the development entity and lead contractor. Just to keep in mind as you're forming teams or folks are forming teams, that is something that we've flagged previously and has continued to be important. Other potential provisions as part of that process are expected to address the addition of potentially new equity partners later in the process. So keeping in mind that there are multiple packages, multiple DBFM packages, there may be situations in which additional equity partners will be appropriate and there will be processes for that. Finally, there will be a focus on provisions that ensure transparency and competitiveness of pricing. Given that this is a PDA, a pre-development agreement approach, that is very important to ensure that there is an emphasis on that throughout to make sure that the best value of projects are being delivered for PennDOT. So at this time, I would like to hand the presentation back to Mike to provide some conclusions.
Thanks, Jody. So that's basically it, short and sweet. We wanted to articulate our procurement approach and what we'll be looking for in development entities, and what some anticipated content for responses may look like. One note to add is that earlier I mentioned a construction size for the project of around $1.5 billion. It should be noted that the total deal will require financing of around $2.5 to $3 billion all in. So just wanted to make that small point of clarification. So again, this concludes our Major Bridges P3 industry outreach presentation. We thank you for your time today, and we remind you to email any questions to our project resource account. We will post a recording of the presentation and the questions and answers document to the P3 website as soon as possible. Thanks again for your interest in this project, and have a great rest of your day.